Welcome to MetaWatch, Games Workshop's regular show where we crunch all the numbers of your favourite games. And this week we're looking at Kill Team. So joining us from the studio is games developer Elliot. How you doing, man? You're right.
Hey, Nick. Thanks for having me.
It's always good to have you here. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us. And you've just come back from the World Championships in Atlanta. What was it like?
So good. Like, I can't describe how awesome it was. It's such an amazing vibe. So many passionate people from all around the world playing Kill Team, man. I got so much energy from it. It was fantastic. And it was so good chatting to different cultures and understanding what it's like playing Kill Team in their country, and people from like parts that I've never even knew play Kill Team. It was so good. I can't speak highly enough of it. So
that's fantastic. You had a good time then.
Yeah, absolutely. And got loads of great feedback and loads of interesting things we can talk about in this episode. But yes, thanks to everyone that went, and to those of you in the future that get a chance to go, definitely go. It was such a good experience. Yeah.
So obviously everyone at the World Championships were the top players in the world for Kill Team. What kind of play did you see?
First of all, to qualify, you had to win an event. So everyone that was there was actually first place at their relevant event. And so it's you've got a pretty high standard of play. And so the things that you would observe at that kind of event isn't necessarily representative of the average Kill Team player. It's definitely the top end of the spectrum. But equally, it's a fantastic microcosm of balance because you've got the best players in the world playing the game. So you're going to get some really, really good feedback from their observations and how they're doing. Lots and lots of things we picked up on. The main thing that we were looking at actually was the teams that weren't there. And so if players aren't taking certain teams to that event, that's a big indicator to us that we probably need to look at that. Probably shows their ceiling. What I mean by that is how much potential they have. Can those teams that weren't there go and win a big event? Maybe not if the best players in the world didn't think so. And so, we really looked quite closely at the teams that weren't represented at the event. And that's something we've looked at in this balanced data slate.
I suppose one of the things you have to look at is that players at that level aren't just taking what they perceive to be the best teams. They're probably preparing for facing what they think are the best teams as well. So the whole, rock, paper, scissors thing comes into play.
Yeah, that's very true. Sometimes there is a bit of a meta game in that, isn't there? Whereby, what do I think is popular in the meta right now? I'll try and take something to counter that. And that definitely played a factor. And you also did have some people, I guess, taking teams because you did a best in faction. And so it all represented your country's score at the end of the day. So if you thought you could get a good faction score, but it's slightly off-meta choice maybe. But nonetheless, there were still some trends that you could pick up on and see to determine the state of balance in the current meta. So it was really useful.
So which kill zones were in use at the World Championships? And crucially, were there any patterns you noticed based on what kill zones were there?
Yeah, okay, so kill zones have a big impact on the game. Compared to many other game systems, it's not just about the army, but the kill zone can actually very much change the game as well. And so the two kill zones were Octarius and Gallowdark, and it was roughly split 50-50 between the two. So one in the Octarius from the very first release, the other obviously when Into the Dark came out, released the close quarters rules, split 50-50 between those. So first of all, some of the sort of tough melee teams unsurprisingly benefit quite a lot in the Gallowdark. When you're coming up against the likes of Chaos Cult and Gallowpox, that was definitely a tighten your belts, tough game here, because they're very, very good in those environments. Then in the Octarius environments, you had the terrain layouts. Terrain layouts is often a big discussion point in the Kill Team community, and the terrain layouts at this event was very much dominated by heavy terrain in the center of the kill zone. And so what that means is that you can get a good safe board space in the midfield. And for teams like Commandos who have sneaky Git tactical ploy, they can sneak their operatives forwards into those heavy terrain features. That's a really good environment for them. Definitely had aggressive melee teams and Commandos who can, like I said, sneak people forwards. They were at home in that kind of environment. And it's not the only reason, but that's perhaps one of the reasons why they were quite popular and did quite well at the event. And so if that's going to be the case of most events are using that kind of terrain in those layouts and 50% into the dark, that's certainly going to impact their balance going forward. So we've looked at that as well.
Of course, that means players have to take into account both kill zones and perhaps teams that are good at both, or perhaps they can pick teams for a mission where you've got a melee focus here or a shooting focus there will benefit quite nicely. But it's interesting that players are sort of choosing their kill teams based on what the kill zones know they're going to be.
Yeah, sure. So if you don't have, for example, as much heavy terrain in the center of the kill zone, Sneaky gets suddenly a lot less effective because Vantage terrain can pick those commandos off that are hiding in light, that kind of stuff. But nonetheless, there does seem to be a trend, and we're starting to get to a more consistent place with how terrain layouts are working. So I think this event was still a good representation of the meta, and I think we should definitely sort of lean towards that and account for it.
So let's move on to the new balanced data slate, which is dropping around the same time as this episode of MetaWatch, which is a nice festive present for our hobbyists. Happy holidays to all of you. What's the aim behind this new balanced data slate?
Sure. So this is quite a big one in terms of the amount of teams we've covered. I think the main thing is going to freshen things up. It's the end of the season, and we've touched on quite a few teams, mostly lifts actually. We've been buffing some teams, which always feels a little better than having a team toned down, if you like. So it's going to give you a lot of fresh new perspective on some teams, which is the first great thing. Other thing to mention is that with a new season on the way, we didn't want to shake things up too much. So whilst we have touched a lot of areas, we haven't necessarily gone in with a heavy hammer on those areas because there is a new Killzone on the way, and a whole host of new teams in the new season as well. And so that's going to have a big impact on the meta anyway. So we want to make sure that we're not giving you too much to think about. It could be a little overwhelming. We'll see how things settle once the new season's out and have another look then, basically.
Yeah, so for example, you don't want to go into a team that's been performing really well into the dark terrain and just tone them down loads because they might not be so effective when it comes to the Beta Decima season.
Yeah, exactly that. And we're going to talk about some of those specifics a little bit later, but you're totally right. We want to be a little bit cautious because there's going to be some natural change anyway. So we need to factor that in. Yeah.
So it's really interesting that this balanced data slate drops straight after the World Championships. I wanted to ask, were there any changes you made that were based on sort of suspicions confirmed at the event, or perhaps things you saw at the championships which made you think maybe we should change something?
Sure. So two teams that dominate the headlines at the event was Commandos and Chaos Cult. I think it was quite common for people to be thinking about Commandos before the event. I spoke about on the last MetaWatch, for instance. They were definitely on our radar, and I think the event largely confirmed those suspicions. So going into the event, that one was confirmed. We had those thoughts before. It was confirmed by the event. Chaos Cult was perhaps a more surprising one. Not necessarily surprising to everyone, but they'd largely dropped off after their recent changes in the previous balanced data slate. And so we didn't expect them to be doing as well as they did. And in fact, we were proved wrong, and they were clearly just biding their time because they did really, really well. So that one was a bit more of a surprise. The other thing that I mentioned, like I said a little bit earlier, was that it showed us a lot of the ceiling of some teams that didn't quite have the capabilities to match with the very, very top teams. And so that was definitely something new we took from the event and looked at quite closely, again, which we'll talk about very, very soon.
But crucially, no sort of knee-jerk reactions. No, this guy's on table one, so we've got to, tone that warband down. Nothing about it at all.
Well, that'd be amazing if I could do a mid-event buff or something. That'd be interesting. But no, nothing like that. Everyone's obviously giving me a hard time always about it, which I take on my stride. It's fine. But it was quite amusing. Day one, everyone was worried about Commandos. Day two, it went to Chaos Cult, and so it was quite funny to see it shift a little. That was quite amusing. But no, nothing mid-event. It's all good.
Right, let's get into the meat of the balanced data slate. And you've mentioned them a couple of times already, the Orc Commandos and the Chaos Cult, and you've mentioned they probably needed a bit of a tone down. So tell me, what is it you've done with those two kill teams, and what observations brought those changes about?
Sure, okay. So Commandos first, their Sneaky Git ploy, which was a big one, where they can basically sneak operatives further up onto the board. That has now been changed to you can only do it once. And equally, you can't change that operative's order with the infiltrate scouting option. This is quite important because you could sneak someone forwards on a conceal order, and then when you activate them, if you've given them an extra action point with dynamite, for example, they could run through and then cause a big explosion or something like that. So it could be very, very aggressive alpha strike potential. So we've changed that to 1, and you can't change the order for that big explosion type thing. That ploy's been around for quite a while, but I think with the change to 3 CP that you get at the start of the battle, that's giving you 3 guys potentially you can do it. So all 3 Commandos infiltrating into the board was a bit much, and so we've dialed that back to just the 1. The other thing we've done is we've slightly adjusted the bomb squig again, just to reduce that sort of that pressure you could apply. The change specifically is that you can't get any APL extra now, so you can't move, dash, and then explode. It's just, again, reducing that threat range a little, just so it doesn't catch someone off guard with such a long distance aggression.
The old 10-inch explosion charge, yeah,
exactly. So Chaos Cults, they have changed regarding, first of all, their devotees. The basic Chaos Scrub. He could mutate when he inflicts damage in combat. Okay, so blood lands on his skin, mutates him up. That's no longer the case, okay? Now he actually has to incapacitate someone in combat, which is quite a big change because he's not great in combat. He's better than a guardsman, but it's not the highest potential. So he's not just automatically mutating now just by causing damage. You actually have to get.
Just needs a lot more blood.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. The other thing is when they mutate, they would previously go back to full wounds. So no matter what the operative is or how much damage the previous operative had, the new operative would always have full wounds. That's now changed. It's your current wounds plus some, depending on what you're mutating into. So you roll some dice, see how much extra wounds you get. And that still applies even if the operative that's mutating hasn't lost any wounds. And so effectively, it's just capping how much wounds they're getting rather than mutating to big, strong creatures. If you've dealt damage, it's going to be a little bit less that you have to then deal with to the next operative too. So.
Still pretty great.
Yeah, they're still pretty good.
Still pretty great.
They're still pretty good. But like I said, with the new season coming, I think that's going to be harder for them. Whilst they might be right at home in the depths of a Space Hulk, they're not going to be at home on some gantries on a SeaWorld. So I think that'll help as well. Yeah.
Now, in the balanced data state, there's quite a few kill teams which are receiving quite the boost, quite a good number of them as well. Can I ask, do you want to go through a few of them and tell us what the changes are and what you're thinking about why they made those changes?
Yeah, I'll give you an overview and some of the reasonings why. So first of all, we've got Exaction Squad. They've had a lot of improvements over recent data states, but they're still not getting there. They're still not quite challenging as we'd like. So we've given them some more. The main thing we've done with them is that we want to preserve their playstyles. They are quite unusual. They're not just another human team that likes to shoot you. They have a lot of interesting melee mechanics. And so what we've done is double down on those and made sure that feel of the team and that flavour of the team is the thing that we're improving, so it's reinforcing that playstyle. The shield guys, they have two profiles before. One was defensive, one was offensive. And the defensive one was really good. It allows you to effectively hit first and double parry. Okay, we've actually combined both of those profiles now, so you can still fight first, but you can choose to double parry, or you can bonk them on the head with a maul, whenever you like. And so that's really going to improve their melee potential. And then when you pair that with some of their other changes, like the Nuncio Aquila, that's 0 AP, it's really going to make them like a sort of a close range team that likes to bully their opponent a little bit around objectives and up close, like I said. So it's going to be quite nice for them.
That's really interesting because that you're actually making changes there to emphasize a play style that you might not otherwise be seeing. So this is more of a sort of a narrative, but also sort of steering the game in one direction kind of change.
Yeah, sure. And I'll be honest, the mechanics of the game are always designed to be thematic and evoke that. So that's the primary thing. And so yes, it's important for us to preserve that. Absolutely, we could just be more heavy-handed, if you like, and do things, but it would lose some of its flavour. So we wanted to preserve their feeling. Absolutely the case. Other teams we have, so we've given some improvements to the Wormblade. Again, they weren't taken at the World Championships. They're quite a tricksy team, so can be quite unforgiving if you don't play them right. One thing about them is their Cult Ambush rule. Again, very flavourful, very thematic, but it's when they change their order, they get a buff, basically. They're better at fighting and shooting when their order's changed. The thing with that, though, is that most of them can only do that once. And so it's quite a short-lived faction rule. Because once you're out in the open, you then can't change your next activation. So what we've done with that is we've slightly changed it so that it also works if they're not visible when you activate them. And so if you manage to sort of use terrain effectively and get a kill, the next time you activate them, if they're not visible, again, they'll get the buff again. So it keeps that ball rolling for them, which is quite nice. The other thing we've done is we've improved the Talon, which is one of their cult agents. Wormblade's really cool where they can take different cult agents that are sort of the superheroes of the Gene Stealer cults. The Talon was the least picked one, whereas now we've given that a little bit of a buff so they can effectively double strike, which is really cool. So you could get a one-hit kill on someone with high damage potential. So it's still an assassin, again, preserving that theme, that flavour for it. But if he picks off the right target, double strike, get the kill without taking any damage. It's quite fun.
Nice.
Some other teams we've given little lifts to. So the Farstalker Kim Band, again, they've had a lot of improvements, but we've made them a little more flexible, a little easier to use with one of their abilities called Call to Kill. Particularly into the dark, it was quite difficult to line it up, especially if someone's around the corner, that kind of thing. So that's a quality of life improvement. We've done the same thing for Pathfinders as well. So their drones now can help you out in close quarters, because they can, if the drone controller's around, you can tell them to open the doors, which is quite funny.
How? Just imagining that with a gun.
Yeah, or he controls the tractor beam.
Sure, I love it.
Or hacks into the command systems. It's
Sure.
fine. So yes, that's going to help them. We've also relaxed a little their construction rules around the recon drone as well. So that's going to help them in all environments. So the Kaskin have had some improvements. So their elite ability, which defines them, where you can basically control your dice, that's been improved a little. So what it effectively does now is, if you roll really bad, it helps you out because you can adjust a second dice. It doesn't get you max hits because you have to discard one to do it. So it just helps you out of a terrible roll. We've also done some minor improvements to them, things around equipment and one of their operatives, which will help. And then the last two teams that have had some little lifts, Corsair Voice Guard. So they have some great potential, but some of their ploys are a little falling behind from the standard you'd expect. And so we'd improve some of their ploys a little bit to make them a little more usable, which is nice. And then the same thing with the Hunter Clade. Hunter Clade was one of our very first teams released in White Dwarf. And again, some of their rules can be a little too conditional. So we've relaxed those a little bit so that you can get a bit more bang for your buck from their faction rule, which is nice. So overall, the theme for a lot of these is that it's quality of life improvements. Yeah. It's going to help them with little lifts. It's not necessarily going to redefine the meta, but it's really going to help them compete a little bit more and you be a little more easier to use.
One thing we talked about before is that kill team players tend to switch between teams. You tend not to be a sort of intercession squad player or a kin band player. You might just go between different teams all the time, and it's these little changes which make people think, oh, I will pick up a Kazakh. I'm definitely about to pick up a Kazakh inbox because of these changes. It's really interesting. Is that it's going to be more diversity in the kind of kill teams you see, especially at events like World Championships.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah, and it's also true to say that we have sort of quite a close-knit community, that you can see trends shift as people jump on a team. And so everyone's going to prove me wrong now and take one of these teams that I've just said is a little buff, and they're going to start destroying everyone with it and prove me completely wrong. But yes, you can easily switch between them, which is quite cool, right? Because as Warhammer hobbyists, we might have favourites, but it's hard to narrow down our focus on one thing. So with Kill Team, you can just give new things a try whenever you want, which is great.
Can't wait to see the uprise of the drones opening doors meta.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's going to happen.
And then I'll be like,
That was great. So as we speak, the new season of Kill Team is right around the corner as we're heading to Beta Decima. Elliot, how is this going to affect the meta in the game?
It is quite a different kill zone to the ones that have come before, which is cool because it means you can rethink about the game and engage with it in a different way. So if you think about the difference between Octarius and then onto the Gallowdark, this one is arguably more of a change. First of all, rather than tight corridors and lots of terrain to hide behind, you're effectively on an ocean gantry, which is much more open and much more risky. You need to be able to think about how to maximize line of sight and really keep your operatives safe. So first of all, shooting is going to be slightly different because when you're shooting across the board, if you're shooting through the sort of the arching sea and the industrial smog, it's going to affect what things can see. And so lining up your shots is going to be a little bit different. You're going to have to think about firing lanes and distances much more specifically. But equally, if you have any operatives that ignore obscuring, that's going to give them a very new lease of life because they can actually manipulate it a little differently. So thinking about your firing lanes and how you're shooting is going to be different. There's no more hiding behind the corridor in Gallowdark waiting to charge around. You're going to have to think about what your opponents can see and things like that, which is very important. So the other thing to think about is the impact on melee teams. Mm-hmm. So if the Gallowdark was really good for melee teams, they could close the distance and get stuck in. It's going to be much harder for them to do that in Beast Decima. Obviously, they have to travel further because of the climbing involved. You also have much more restricted movement where you can go. Being able to get onto gantries is going to be a little harder. So jump tests, you might fail some jump tests and be caught out. So moving your operatives around from melee is going to be much more difficult. So you have to think about that a little more cleverly.
The other thing I've noticed in playing a Beta Decima is that the objectives in the game tend to be in the middle and on the gantries, so players have to get out there if they want to score those points.
Sure, that's right. You're going to have to sort of really think about that because, I say, if you fail that jump test, but equally you can be quite exposed. So your timing of when to push for objectives is going to be quite important. It may be lower scoring games because sometimes you just can't get there. So yeah, that is going to be a factor.
Or perhaps even TAC ops will come into play even more because you might be scoring more points than them more reliably.
Yep. There's a lot more vantage points, so secure vantage is going to be different. Also, some ops will be more prevalent than they have been in previous kill zones, which is quite cool. So my favourite combo is the Reaver from Phobos. There's some equipment he can have. It allows him to climb better and drop easier. And so he suddenly, with a combat blade, is sort of gliding around the kill zone, assassinating people. It's quite fun. So yeah, people that can sort of maneuver around a little differently, maybe with fly, also operatives with climbing equipment. That's going to be much more common. Thinking you're going to have to think about things, different combinations that you weren't previously doing to make the most of this environment, which is going to be nice.
You mentioned the climbing equipment, which is a really good point because loads of players might have that reliable bit of equipment they always take on their kill team, but at the same time, you might want to give 4 or 5 of them the climbing equipment for 1 EP each.
Yep.
And so all of a sudden you find yourself without that crucial gun bipod or grenade or whatever it might be.
Yeah. You've only got 10 equipment points. If you can't as easily get into range to throw your grenade, maybe that's not as useful. But then if you're on an exposed vantage terrain now, smoke grenade might be even more useful. Drop it on the objective and jump over. That's going to give you a bit of cover. So it's going to be really nice to think about the game differently. If we've been playing the game in a very specific way and we found some cool combinations over the last year that we go to quite frequently, now we've got to think about all those again. And that's the best part, where you can really sort of think about different things and gives you fresh impetus to get stuck in and figure out what the cool stuff is.
It's a whole new problem to solve, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've completed Octarius, you've completed Morok and Nachmund and Into the Dark, and now it's time to go for Beta Decima.
Yeah. Now how do I get across those gantries and not get shot? So yes, it's going to be some new challenge for people, which is really important. That's why we do these seasons, is that it gives you a fresh perspective for the year. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Of course, the new Salvation box, the first in the season of Beta Decima, sees the Space Marine Scouts arrive and the Blades of Cain with the Striking Scorpions. Tell us about those teams and how you think they're going to shake things up.
So first of all, Blades of Cain, really interesting one. They are another elite team. You get a few more than you get for Space Marines, but they're really quite flexible. So whilst they don't have a variation of different operatives, every operative is quite focused. Banshee, Dire Avenger, or Striking Scorpion, they all have aspect techniques that you could do across the team. So they give you a lot of flexibility in when to use those techniques and that kind of thing. And so they're going to be quite an interesting team for people to figure out when the best techniques to use, and equally for your opponent, knowing that they can do these amazing things that most operatives can't do, backflips and double shots, etc., etc., etc. It's going to be really cool. Scout Squad, they are more of the raw physiology of a Space Marine. They're not as experienced and as well trained as a Space Marine, being sort of new neophytes to the Space Marine chapter. But they're still Space Marines, and they also have a lot of sneaky infiltrating type stuff. Their ability to sort of place a lot of tokens down with their faction ability is going to be even more interesting on Beta Decima, because you're effectively channeled where you need to go.
Yep.
Okay, there's certain areas you just can't go, so therefore the impact of some of those tokens that they place down is going to be vamped up in something like Beta Decima. So they're going to be interesting as well, and they've also got quite a lot of flexibility with regards to operative that's better when he's climbing. Again, great on Beta Decima. Operatives that can are obscured and when they're shooting, that kind of stuff. So yeah, they're going to be fun.
It's really great that the 2 kill teams coming in the first set of the season are almost ideally suited to it. The Scouts for their sort of mid-range shooting and mobility, and the Striking Scorpions for their super sneaky ability to get into combat and then strike when they get there as well. It's just both require quite a lot of clever play.
Yeah, sure. And I think ultimately we would like all teams to have some tools to do with different kill zones. I guess it just so happens that those teams seem to have some really great ones. The Banshee being able to do a jump across, do a backflip with fly across gantries without having to roll that jump test. It's going to be really useful. But I think ultimately all teams should be able to compete and do well in that environment. And so when that season starts, we'll certainly be paying attention to that. And if some teams feel like they're struggling in the new kill zone, that will impact the balance too. And so maybe that's something in the future for the next balanced data set we'll look at. So yeah, everyone should feel like they have a place. Just so happens that those two feel like it should be pretty good at it. So that's good. Yeah.
Elliot, thank you so much for coming to talk to us about the World Championships, the data slate, and the new season. Which of the 2 new kill teams are you painting first?
Blades of Cain.
Really? I'm
Yeah,
going for
yeah,
Space
yeah.
Marine Scouts,
Yeah.
obviously.
No, I had a lot of fun with those. It was quite a unique way of doing their rules, which I'm excited to try out. So
Are you going for all one aspect, or are you going to mix it up?
I'm painting mine Yunari actually.
Okay.
All go non-helmet heads and all the dark red armor. So yeah, Yunari.
That's very cool. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us, man. And thank you as well for watching, and join us next time on MetaWatch.